So, in the double trouble video that I did last week, the one where I used the 2 new arcanes from arbitrations to kind of power up your primary and melee at the same time by using certain setups, I had some people say that I could combine it with a secondary fire from the ferox, which throws it on the ground and it creates a field where enemies are tethered to the spear and it pulses out damage. So the idea here is to stack this on top of the Zenistar disc, which would give you more damage and it would still feed itself via the chargers. Now, as I was playing around with this, I found out that you can make it a lot juicier by using Wukong as well. So we're gonna spawn 8 level 150 heavy gunners, and we're gonna do the following. We're gonna jump in, we're gonna summon our Celestial Twin, we are then going to throw the ferox using the secondary fire, after which we're gonna do a charge attack with the Zenistar to throw out the disc, and then we can happily stand aside and watch all 3 of our weapons do damage while we're not using any of them. Now this only really works with a couple of very specific setups, because the twin will normally choose a primary over a secondary, but since we're using the ferox and we're throwing it away, we technically don't have it anymore. So he can't use it, which means the twin has to use a secondary weapon when we switch to melee, allowing us to do damage with the primary, secondary and melee weapons while not using any of them. And I think that is just awesome. Now the one downside here, though I'm not entirely sure I would call it a downside, is that if you have a really strong secondary weapon like I have here, my twin is using the Doom Shroom, which is a rivened up Catch-a-Moon kit gun, which is really strong, he's gonna get most of the kills, so you're not really going to proc either of the 2 arcane chargers. But that also means that you can use defensive arcanes instead, you know, something like Arcane Grace and Guardian to keep you alive while you, I don't know, go and make a cup of tea or something. Also, every now and then, once you set it up, the twin just decides it wants to use either the ferox or the Zenistar, even if you have the Zenistar equipped, so in that case you have to switch back to the Doom Shroom and then to the Zenistar to reset the twin. But it's not that big of a deal because it doesn't happen all that often, and also for whatever reason, once the twin is wielding the secondary, it will only switch between the secondary and melee. It doesn't like going back to the primary even if you pick it up. Now, since I know people will be asking about the builds on these weapons, even though it doesn't really matter, it's more about the equipment than the equipped mods, here are the builds. So for the ferox, you don't really need to focus on the primary fire because you're not going to be using it, so you don't need to use crit mods. So you basically just want to put in as much damage as possible, and you can optionally put in Firestorm to make the area of effect once you throw the spear a little bit bigger. For the Catch-a-Moon secondary, I'm using my standard setup, which is just a whole load of crit with primed crit mods and a lot of corrosive and heat, and I'm using a Riven that's been nerfed to the ground unfortunately, so I should probably re-roll it a bit. And the Zenistar setup is kind of a standard melee setup as well. You basically just want to squeeze in a lot of status, though the one thing you don't need is attack speed, because all you're going to be doing is just 1 charge attack and that's it. Though you ideally want to put in condition overload so that it does more damage as you proc status on the enemy with, you know, the various different weapons. You want to put in primed reach so that the area of effect of the disc is much bigger, and you probably want to squeeze in fever strike as well so that you bring the corrosive damage up in line with blast. And that's pretty much all there is to say about it. It's just a really unique interaction that I came across while I was fuffing around, and I thought, you know, maybe you can use it yourself. Who knows? It's just so cool, you know, being able to do damage with all 3 of your weapons while not actually using any of them. It's just really neat, I think. And it's not just a funky little setup that's gonna work on Earth and maybe Venus. This can demolish sorties very easily, actually. The footage you're watching right now is from a sortie mobile defense. It is infested, which are probably the squishiest, but still, it is a sortie. So yeah, do with this whatever you want, and as always guys, I thank you very much for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video and you will have some fun with this setup as well, and I will see you some other time. Bye bye.